So you two are red mangroves, and you are extremely important because in the mangrove environment, it's pretty muddy and smelly. Has anybody ever been to the mangroves, been fishing, or out into the mangroves, or walked through the mud?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember what it smells like? Yeah, that one. Smells a bit like, little bit of hydrogen sulfide. And that's, what that is when these guys are out there, and the leaves are all falling down onto the ground. Where's my crab? What you do is you come along and you pick the leaves up and you bury them down under the mud and you eat them. And what happens is it's all decomposing underneath the mud and it makes this really, really productive environment, which is a perfect place in a nursery for fish. As Martin was telling us this morning, 80% of all the marine life out there in the reef and out in the actual marine environment starts off in the mangroves as a nursery area. So just in the same way that you might do when you went to nursery school or kindy, we all start there, we gradually go to primary school. All the little fish start out in the mangroves and then they gradually move out into the ocean and they're big fish. So what we're going to talk about, but some of the adaptations, we'll start off with some of the adaptations that we've got with the mangrove trees. Now you're all going to be tested on this later, so you might listen. So some of the adaptations the mangrove trees have, well, one of the things that they have to adapt is their roots. Because when you have to have your feet in dirty, stinky, smelly mud all the time, it's actually really, really difficult for you to breathe. Because the plants breathe not only through their leaves, but also through their roots. So the mangrove trees have got lots of different roots. Some of them have got what are called aerial roots that are actually above the surface of the water. And some of them, you might have even seen them as you've been walking around in the mangrove area, have these funny little things that look like little pencils sticking out of the sand in the mud. Have you seen those? Yeah. They're called pneumatophores. And when the tide goes out, the pneumatophores go and hold their breath when the tide comes back in. So they're very special adaptations. Right, we'll move around. So what sort of adaptations do you think our crabs might have for living in the environment? Yes, mud skipper. Claws, very good, they're handy. Good for cutting up things, for fighting, for keeping other animals away. What else have we got as a crab? We've got a hard shell. And that helps protect them from predators and things like that as well. So you're a pretty well adapted crab. Now, you are a pteric sandpiper. So how do you think the pteric sandpiper is adapted to this environment? Yes. It eats all the insects, but what sort of things about the pteric sandpiper say to you that this is a good bird for living in mangroves? Long beak, perfect. That's a great answer. If you're a shorebird, you have a really long beak. Now, not all of them have long beaks. Some of them are slightly. This one's got a long beak too. You're a heron, so we'll use the two herons and the things together. When you bend down, can you go all the way down to your toes? And you start delving around in the mud, and you're looking for small arthropods and insects and little things that are crawling around in the mud. It helps to have a nice long beak. What's even more clever about all the different shorebirds that live in the mangrove environment is their beaks are all different lengths. Why do you think they might have different length beaks? Anybody have an idea? Yes. They eat different things, but also it stops competition. If you all had the same length beak, you'd only be able to reach down to the same depth. And if you all ate at that depth, some of you are going to go hungry very quickly. So some of them have got short beaks, so they can only get the things at the top of the surface, and some of them have got very long beaks, like our pteric sandpiper and our herons, and they can go down even deeper. But the heron is even slightly better adapted. He's got a very, very sharp beak, and he uses that to spear fish. He'll actually spear fish and capture them. So we're moving around. Something else is very special about our sandpiper. What about our colours? Camouflage, fantastic. It works perfectly in the mangrove environment. Jellyfish. Now, if you're a jellyfish, you're a pretty special animal. How many people have seen jellyfish washed up on a beach? Are jellyfish on a beach much use?
They're all dead.
You're no good at all. As a jellyfish, you've got 98% of your body is made of water. And that's because it's a perfect animal for living in the ocean or in the water itself. It's adapted because it's worked out that it floats in the water. It doesn't need a skeleton, it doesn't need bones or anything like that. But this one has got some very, very special adaptations on its tentacles. And on its who was it who said stinging cells? Very good. On its tentacles, it's got stinging cells. And what it does is it trails its tentacles in the water, waiting for a nice tasty looking snail you might be today. Oh, I feel like snail. And he trails them down and tingle, 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 stings the animal it's trying to feed on. It's usually plankton. And it just pulls the tentacles back into its mouth and eats it. So very special, very beautiful animal, the jellyfish. All right, Mr. Manta Ray, who looks like Count Dracula, I think. You're very special.
Thank you.
That's okay. In some countries, they refer to these as devil rays. Yes. I don't know why. I think they're pretty special and spectacular. Massive, great big wings on them, 2 or 3 metres in some cases. It's probably the biggest of all our stingray species, the manta ray. The way that the manta ray is actually adapted though, very clever. You might have spotted these if we turn them around. You see these things here? Eyes are on the top, but the mouth's on the bottom. So you can't, a manta ray is never actually going to see what it eats. But what it does is it uses these very, very special bits and its fins to funnel the food in towards its mouth. So this is a body adaptation. So that works particularly well. The other thing that the manta rays have is usually a lighter undercoat, and a much darker top surface. Camouflage. And it's the same trick that's used by our sharks, who have a lighter undercover and a darker top, and also some of our birds. This one, white-bellied sea eagle, lighter from underneath, darker from top. And the reason they do that is because with the lighter cover, if you're a fish or something like that and you're looking up, you see the light of the surface. Or if you're just looking up at the sky, you see the sun. You don't see light colours. If you're looking down into the water, where it's deep and dark, you're seeing the dark surface or the back of the shark. So that's a really good camouflage trick. Sawfish. Okay, sawfishes are pretty cool. So they've got this really, but they're also quite endangered. In fact, they're very endangered. The last sawfish we had in Bundaberg was about 20 years ago, and it was massive. It was about 3 metres long. They found this one, and ultimately the sawfish uses this incredibly delicate nose in the mangrove mud, which it sort of shuffles along, and ultimately what it's doing is trying to scare up the little fish, which it then eats. All right, snail. Well, everybody can probably guess what the good adaptation of a snail is. Any ideas? Its shell. It's extremely easy for a snail to hide. If you carry your home around you with you, it's always good to have some place to hide. And if you haven't got a place to hide, if you've got your own, then you're always going to be safe. Unless, of course, you find somebody with a bigger mouth than your shell. But luckily, there aren't that many of them. There are also some snails that are what are called carnivore snails, and they burrow a hole through. Are you ticklish? They burrow a hole through the snail shell and actually suck all the goodness out. So, not so good being a snail, but lots of adaptations being a snail. We'll carry on here. Oh, we have a prawn. Lovely prawn here. So, some great adaptations of being a prawn. So, some of the things that you've got legs, not flats, but they're legs. We've got, and legs are good because you can actually start to move around on the bottom and explore. We've also got body segments. And body segments are handy. If you've only got one body segment, or a snail's shell, you're somewhat limited in the movements you can make, and you can only move very slowly. Whereas if you're a prawn, and you've got lots of body segments, you can actually move very fast. You're very agile, aren't you?
Very.
Very. And we also have a great tail, which you're upside down.
Oh.
Good eyes this end.
Oh.
It's on your arm.
Oh, that's better. You've got this great tail here, this flappy tail, and they can use that to either move very, very quickly if they need to escape from something that's eating them, or they can also tuck it in underneath their body and use it to store their eggs underneath when they're breeding. So very handy being a prawn. That's pretty cool. Manta rays. So we've talked a little bit about you, but you are beautiful. Mud skipper. Well, mud skipper's pretty special. I think, what do you think is one of the things that you spot straight away about a mud skipper? Does it look like an army soldier?
Yeah.
Camouflage, absolutely perfect. This is actually quite an ancient species, and this one's actually got a very special adaptation that allows the fish to live out on the land. So basically the mud skipper can survive by holding a lungful of water and can actually come out onto the land, and it will come out because it knows that other things aren't going to be able to eat it out of the water, and it'll sit there picking away at all the detritus and all the rich food, much like crabs and things do, and that's the way that it adapts to its environment. My four beautiful butterflies, I haven't forgotten them. All right. You are an endangered species. And you're an endangered species that lives in our area. And all the way down to the Mary River in the Great Sandy Strait. You're an Illiges and blue butterfly, which makes you magnificent. But you guys actually have a behaviour adaptation that is incredibly special. The way that you survive in the mangroves, and this is why you're in the mangroves with everybody else, is that what you do is you come along when you're ready to lay your eggs, and you lay them in a stump of a mangrove tree, an old mangrove tree. The ants take your eggs back to the nest. And the ants then feed the eggs until they hatch, the larvae hatch on the dew that are coming out of the ants. And the little larvae keep producing dew that the ants keep feeding on. And in that way, there's a symbiotic relationship that enables the little larvae and the caterpillars, as it were, until they become beautiful butterflies, and they then fly out of the scarps and away. So the ants and the butterflies live in beautiful harmony in the mangroves.
So those butterflies don't make a cocoon or chrysalis?
No, I don't think they do.
No, because
Not from what I can
otherwise
gather.
it wouldn't work.
No, they're protected in the ant nest. And they need old mangroves. They can't live in new mangroves because new mangroves don't have any stumps. So, very special. Mr. Heron, I didn't forget about you. We talked a little bit about you, which is very special. We didn't talk a little bit about the size of your legs. Now, in this class, you are quite tall. But as a heron, you are also very, very tall. And the size of your legs, just like the size of your beak, to a shorebird is very important.
Exactly.
Because what that does is it says how deep the water can be while you can still feed. You're not a duck. You don't float around on the surface and feed like that. You wade around majestically in the mud and feed on the edge. But because your legs are slightly longer than our sandpiper legs, you can actually feed in deeper water than they can. Very special. White-bellied seal, what do you say? Yes, I'll talk to you about a little bit more about your counter-camouflage or why you're around that. But you also have the most spectacular eyes. You're a predator. Your eyes are actually located on the sides of your face, not on the front of your face. And the reason for that is that gives you a much, much better field of view for when you're hunting. Herbivores and things like that, are only focusing on the food, whereas a predator has got to focus on hunting, catching food. So that's one of your special adaptations. Your beak's also very, very different to your heron. He's using his for spearing fish. You're using yours for ripping things apart. You're a super predator. And talking about specially adapted teeth, the most special adaptation on teeth has to be sharks. Every shark species has a different type of tooth. So you've got some shark species that have big, sharp, triangular-shaped teeth, like the great whites, used for cutting and ripping into skin, for things like seals and dolphins and turtles, things that they eat. Might not want to stand so close. And some sharks have just tiny little peg-like teeth because they're grinders. They'll eat on shellfish and snails and things like that. You might want to stay a little bit down to ground too. The grey nurse has a triangular-shaped tooth with two barbs, and they're a fish eater, and they bite in, and the two little barbs actually act like a fork. You know how when you put your fork into your food to hold it? That's how they feed, and then they can swallow. So, wonderful adaptations on our shark. Lots of adaptations. I could talk about sharks all day, and I know you've listened to me, because everybody wants to know about sharks. A shark has, on its nose, have you ever seen a picture of a shark up close? It looks like it's got blackheads on its nose or spots. Those are called the ampullae of Lorenzini. They're little jelly-filled sacs, and they can detect electricity pulses. They can detect 5 millionths of a volt, which when you're a fish and you're swimming past, and your body's, all the nerve impulses in your body are going off, they're actually detecting the electricity in your body. So they can see you as a picture of electricity. And when you go, shark, it sees, and it goes, ha ha ha, shot it. There you go, so you're expecting. Turtles, one of my favorites. So obviously some very special adaptations on the turtle. First of all, it has a hardened carapace. Very good. It protects you in all sorts of conditions. Every now and again we spot turtles out on the beach that are missing a flipper. They can survive when they lose one flipper. Sometimes they can even survive 2 flippers. But without that hard carapace, a turtle is not going to survive very long in the ocean. The other thing is that this hard carapace is usually a greeny-browny colour, which means that it's well camouflaged in the ocean. So that's important when you're a little turtle, because sharks and things like that eat little turtles. When they get a bit bigger, they get a bit tougher, they're stronger, and they're much more than a mouthful, as you can see. All right, now I'm on to another very special endangered animal program. This one, does anybody know what it is? Rugrat, squirt, not quite. All right, mouse. This is the water mouse. And again, this is another endangered species that we have here in our area. The water mouse, or it used to be called the false water rat, is actually this extremely cute, furry little critter that lives in the mangroves. And it builds a mound. Why do you think it might build a mound? Keep it safe, and also to keep it out of the water. Keep it away from foxes. They're actually a major problem for the mouse. So this critter lives in the mangroves. It builds a mound to keep it out of the wet, and it feeds on small insects and worms and things like that that live in the mangrove area along the edges. It's very special. Is there anybody I didn't talk to about their adaptations? Good. So you all remember now how you are taught. Oh, I forgot one.
Pesky
Martin.
mosquito.
The pesky mosquito. So, it's an insect, so it has a compound eye. Does anybody know what a compound eye is like? It's very sensitive, but it's also... You see different angles. When you look through a compound eye, when we look through our eyes, we see one image. When you look through a compound eye, you see literally hundreds of images. And that all gets processed and gives the mosquito some exact information about usually what he's looking for. And what he's looking for is warm-blooded animals. So our water mouse is looking a bit nervous now because round here, you're the only warm-blooded animal. The other thing that's specially adapted in the mosquito, other than wings, very helpful, getting you from point A to point B, is this very, very nasty little proboscis, which they can use to penetrate the skin and suck blood. Works a bit like a straw, and once it's penetrated the skin, it can actually suck the blood out of the skin.
And one left.
One left. Who did I miss? Oh,